Okay, let's be real for a second. When you think of the Old Testament, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Probably a huge, kind of dusty book, right? Filled with confusing laws and ancient stories that seem, well, a little out there. You are definitely not alone in thinking that. But what if I told you that inside these pages is the hidden key to understanding pretty much everything else in the biblical story? Stick around, because we are about to make this massive foundational text feel surprisingly accessible.
So, here's our game plan. First, we're going to bust some of the most common myths about the Old Testament. Then, I'm going to share a single image with you that will completely change how you see the big picture. From there, we'll map out its structure, find that one golden thread that ties every single book together, and then we'll wrap up with a super simple guide on where you can jump in yourself. Let's get into it.
All right, first things first. Why should we even bother with these ancient texts? I mean, really, let's get straight to the point on why this is so much more than just a history lesson.
And let's be totally honest, this is what a lot of us think, isn't it? That it's just this book of, strange rules and stories about a really angry God. It's the kind of thing that makes people go, yeah, nope, not for me.
But this is where we're going to flip that whole idea on its head. See, on one side, you have this common view of it as this locked up, totally irrelevant book. But the reality? It's the essential backstory. It's where we first get to know God's character and see the very beginning of his grand plan of redemption. And that plan, believe it or not, is filled with grace and hope right from page 1.
Think about it this way. Without the Old Testament, the story of Jesus almost feels like it comes out of nowhere. This is the text that sets the entire stage. It shows us God's complex character, that he's both holy and just, but also incredibly merciful. And it is packed with promises that create this deep anticipation for a savior. It's literally the setup for the entire second act of the story.
And to really get a handle on that foundational role, let's use an analogy. I think this one really brings the whole concept to life.
I absolutely love this analogy of a cathedral. We walk in and we admire the beautiful stained glass windows, the soaring ceilings, the incredible architecture. That's kind of like the New Testament. But we totally forget that none of it could stand without the massive, unseen foundation holding the whole thing up. Well, that is the Old Testament.
And this really gets to the core of it. Every major event you read about in the New Testament, Jesus' birth, his ministry, the spread of the gospel, is built squarely on the foundation of the history, the laws, and the prophecies that came before. If you take away that foundation, the whole structure just crumbles. Okay, so now we get why it's so important. But what is this foundation actually made of? It really helps to stop thinking of it as a single book and start thinking of it as an entire library.
Yeah, we're talking about 39 distinct books written over 1,000 years by a ton of different authors. Now, I know that sounds like a lot, but thankfully, they're organized into just a few main sections, which makes it way easier to navigate.
This whole library of 39 books is actually pretty neatly organized into just 4 main sections. You've got the law, the historical books, wisdom and poetry, and the prophets. So let's just do a quick flyover of each one.
So it basically breaks down like this. The law gives us all the origins, creation, and God's core promises. The history books, well, that's the epic, sprawling narrative of the nation of Israel. Wisdom and poetry is really the heart of the Old Testament. We're talking songs, prayers, and seriously practical life advice. And finally, the prophets act as God's messengers, speaking of both judgment and this incredible hope for the future. So, with 39 different books written across all these genres and time periods, what's the one big idea that holds this entire library together? Is there one?
Yes, there is. And it all comes down to this one powerful idea: covenant. The single thread that's woven through every law, every story, and every poem is God's unfolding plan to partner with humanity to rescue and restore a broken world. That, right there, is the central plot of the whole thing.
So, what in the world is a covenant? Well, it's way more than just a contract. Think of it more like a sacred, unbreakable promise that completely defines a relationship. And here's the key. If you can understand this one word, you can unlock the entire plot of the Old Testament. It's a game changer.
And what's so powerful about this theme is that it's always pointing forward. Every story, every law, every promise is building this anticipation for something, or more accurately, someone, to come. It's all leading towards a prophesied Messiah and the ultimate fulfillment of that original promise. a brand new covenant for all people.
And that promised Savior is known as the Messiah, which is Hebrew for the Anointed One. The hope for this figure is one of the most powerful currents running through all the prophetic books, and it's what connects the entire Old Testament story directly to the events of the New.
Okay, so we've covered the why and the what. Now for the really big question. Where on earth do you even start? How can you actually begin reading this in a way that makes sense?
Here's a simple game plan for you. First, just start with Genesis and Exodus, but take them slowly. Don't rush. Second, get yourself some context. A good study Bible can be an absolute game changer here. Third, as you're reading, just jot down some notes about what each part seems to reveal about God's bigger plan. And finally, ask the most important question. Not just what does this say, but how does this shape my understanding of God? That one question shifts everything from just gathering information to having a real encounter. Because that's the ultimate goal, right? It's not about becoming an expert in ancient history. It's about discovering a living, breathing story of God's faithfulness that is still incredibly relevant and still unfolding in our world today. So, the question I'm going to leave you with isn't if you should explore this foundation, but where you'll start digging. Will it be the epic origin stories back in Genesis, the raw, honest emotion of the Psalms, or the world-changing hope you find in Isaiah? The choice is yours.